Hey gang, thanks for joining me for another episode of Photoshop for Artists. Now, those of you who have watched the previous two episodes know that this course or this series of shows is directed at those of you who want to draw in Photoshop and you're not interested in all of the other graphic design business, the other 3D business, the photography, editing, and so on. You want to draw and paint here in Photoshop. This is for you. We're only laser focusing on the features and on the tools that really apply to you as a person who likes to draw and paint. And so today is the big one. Today we're talking about brushes. Obviously these are essential for you to do your work, and we're going to cover the basics of the Photoshop brush settings panel, how to make your own brushes, and how to understand what it is that makes a Photoshop brush work. Okay, so we're going to dive right in because this is a big one today. Here we are in Photoshop, and I'm going to say a quick hello to folks who are joining us over on Behance. That's be.net/Adobe Live. Okay, if you're watching over on YouTube or Twitter or elsewhere, well, thanks for joining us, okay? But if you want to join the chat and ask me questions in real time, in person, right here at this moment, go head over to be.net/Adobe Live, okay? What's up, Cryo and Peter and Gareth and Umacorn and Sam and Steve and Derek and Caroline. Did I say hi, Gary? All these nice people. Thank you for joining us. And let's get cracking. So, Photoshop, all right, way back in the early days, introduced to people the concept of brushes. And to begin with, these were quite simple. They were things that you may be familiar with, such as the hard round brush and the soft round brush. These are the old classic defaults, okay? You'll notice that when I open my brushes panel here, I don't even bother with those guys, okay? But they are there. And when you first open Photoshop and you first get cracking with brushes, you're going to see that there are a set of default brushes: hard round, soft round, etc. We're going to talk briefly about those today, but then we're going to jump right into the good stuff, which is the fact that you can create brushes that do any manner of things, okay? Any number of different effects you want, any special effects, any natural media that you want to emulate, pencils, inks, even watercolor, and there's a trick to that. You can do it right here, okay? Now you notice that I have a brushes panel. You might be first thinking, well, where's mine? If you do not have a little section here for your menus where you can tuck away, all right, tools and other windows, all right, you may not notice that your brushes are there, and if you don't see them, right here where it says window, okay, we're going to go right up there. Make sure that brushes are visible right here, okay? Once you have those visible, you're going to find them, okay? And you can take this little window, you can leave it out in the open like this. You can tuck it away with some other tools, right? You can move those around, switch places, etc. All right? And you can tuck them in little places like this, which is what I like to do. Once they're there, you can move them around, okay? Everything's fully customizable when it comes to the way you display your tools and everything else in Photoshop, and that's a nice thing. Another thing you can do if you want to see your brushes is you can go to Window again, and under Workspace, you can go to Essentials, and you'll see brushes there, okay? Or Painting, and you'll see brushes there. And these are different preset layouts for your tools and your panels and everything, where you'll definitely have those brushes visible to you. All right, so speaking of the default brushes, now I'm just going to open up my brushes here, and I'm going to take the current brush that I have, and I'm going to open my brush settings panel. Now, normally if you have brushes visible, brush settings will also be visible, but if you don't see those, remember again, Window, Brush Settings, make sure that that's active. We're going to talk a lot about this today, okay? The settings for your brush, of course, are very important for how the brush will appear when you make marks. What's it going to look like, okay? How will the brush behave, right? What kind of textures does it have, the shapes it has, and all those things? Well, we're going to mess around a lot with that today. right here in the brush settings panel. I'm just doing this for a moment here under the brush tip shape, and I'm going to change it to a plain old circle, okay, just to get us cracking here. So we keep things really, really simple. And I'm going to turn off all the extra fancy business. All right. So a typical Photoshop brush will probably look like this. Okay, you're just dragging a circle around on the screen. And when you are brushing in Photoshop, let me explain what's actually happening here. Opening up again this brush settings right here. The first category we can mess around with is brush tip shape. And you notice here it's selected a little circle, right? Nothing too fancy there. This normally, okay, the spacing setting here is set somewhere around 1 to 5 or 10%, something in that vicinity, okay? And what we're doing is we're making it look like I'm drawing a line on the screen. But what's actually happening is this. I'm going to increase the spacing, and I want you to see what we see there, okay? This kind of demystifies what's happening when it comes to you painting a stroke of some kind with a brush on your canvas. And what's really happening is this circle right here, okay, is the brush stamp. This is the most important thing, is the stamp is the shape that your brush has. And when you're moving it around, making lines, etc., you're taking that shape and you're simply dragging it in one direction or another and repeatedly stamping along that line that you're drawing with that shape, okay? And that's what's happening here. So this is a simple circle that as I move this way and that way, it just follows my cursor around and stamps that little circle. But of course, if I tighten up the spacing right here between each successive stamp and bring it all the way down to 1%, well, each of those circles is so close to the one that preceded it that it gives the illusion of a solid line. This is stamp-based painting, okay? And this is what you're getting here in Photoshop. All right, so that's how it works. And at the lowest level there, the simplest level, that is what a Photoshop brush is, okay? Now, we have our color picker, which we've talked about before. I can, of course, assign a color and then paint with that color. I can change the color, paint with that color. Now you may think there's nothing you can really do with the brush this simple, but you'd be surprised how many people who are professional artists use the simple hard round brush to do all kinds of things, okay? To do a lot of really impressive painting. You know, if I wanted to, just with a brush like this, right, I can still have enough control to where I can paint a shape, color it in, right? And I can paint shapes next to that shape to kind of carve things out, right? And make things take on the shape, the form that I want. And one of the tricks to doing this, let's say if I want to add some hair here, right? I just do this, draw this little person here. One of the tricks to making this work is I get out here and I say, okay, I want this to be cut off right here. I want to carve that away. Well, I could grab another color and paint next to it. Oops, like this. Say there, I'm just going to paint around it like that and get that to be exactly how I want it. That's one thing I could do, okay? Another thing I could do is I could erase. So if you hold down on a North American keyboard the tilde key, which looks like this, okay, in the top left of your keyboard. If you hold this down, you can erase with the brush you currently have selected. See that? So I can do this. I can erase with this brush. So now I have the additive and subtractive stuff going on, all with the same tool, okay? And that again is the tilde key. Looks like that. The other thing though that I can do to get precise with the hard round brush is change the size of the brush. Now there are a couple ways to do this. I've always been a keyboard command guy with the bracket keys. Okay, brackets. You'll find them over on the right of the keyboard. And with the bracket keys, I can size the brush up, okay, or down. Left bracket key, size it down. Right bracket key, size it up. So as I hit that key, notice that the brush is getting smaller, and there we go. So of course this gets very, very handy for painting in details, for changing the size of the brush, and for making things that are not such big shapes. Okay, so now I could come in and I can do this, right? So I am basically painting. Yes, it's simple, just solid colors, okay? But it works, right? Now the other way to size your brush up and down is to hold down the Option and Control on your keyboard and then move to the right or left, okay? See that? Right or left, sizing the brush up and down. Remember that if you're on a PC, every time I say the word Option, you should be thinking Alt, right? Alt key. So holding those two down, I can size up and down. But another interesting thing I can do, okay, with these keys is if I'm using any basic round brush, whether it's soft or hard, okay, I can move up or down to control the hardness of the brush. So watch, I'll move upwards like this and now paint with the brush. And what you'll notice is that the edge is soft. This is a soft edge now. And this does not apply to custom brushes, okay? This only applies to the basic brushes in Photoshop, the default brushes, the round brushes, okay? But this is a neat little thing to know about, okay? Up and down, hardness of the brush, left and right, okay? For size. Some people like that. I've always been a keyboard command guy with the up and down. One of the things I like about sizing up and down with the bracket keys is that I know that between a 1 pixel and 10 pixel brush, within that range, sizing up and down is going to move them up by 1 pixel size. So if I'm at a 3 pixel size brush and I hit the right bracket key, it will size it up to 4, and I know this. Then as I go above 10, I know that I'm going to be sizing, okay, in tens. For example, here I am at, let me just move this down, in fives rather, excuse me. Here I'm at 10 pixels, okay? I'm gonna size it up, it goes to 15, then 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. When I get up to 50, where is it? There we go. Okay, once I get up to 50 pixels, I know that as I increase the size with the bracket keys, I'm gonna be moving in tens. Then once I get up to 100, it's going to 25, 50, 75, okay, and then 50s, and then we start going into hundreds. Knowing this system makes it easy for me to size my brush up at exact sizes really quickly, and I like that. All right, so there are some ways for you to work with the basic brush. You can make it soft, make the hard edge, okay, size it up and down. All right, so what do I do then if I want to do some really good painting? Well, just with this brush alone, okay, imagine the following scenario. I say, I'm going to paint a shape, okay? Fill that in with color. And you'll remember from a couple weeks ago when we did this class that I talked to you about locking layer transparency, right? Right down here, lock layer transparency. There's a little box there for that. And the keyboard command for that is to hit the slash key right below the question mark. Okay, so you've got your question mark on your keyboard, and right below that you've got your slash key. You hit that slash key, it's going to take whatever layer you currently have and just lock that layer transparency. And once I've done that, I can go ahead and size my brush up, okay? And I can make the brush soft, right? Option Control, whoop. We go down to a hardness setting of 0. So this is a really soft brush, okay? And I can come over here and just make this slightly darker and just do that. Sort of add some some shading there. We hold down the Option key to temporarily select that eyedropper. Okay, and I can go back and forth and try to kind of get this to where I want for a shape, right? And if I unlock that layer transparency, maybe I can add something, right? And start to paint like this, blah, blah, blah. So I can do hard stuff, soft stuff, and remember you have your lasso tool and your other selection tools, and you can get really specific with shapes, right? Command-Shift-I. Command-Shift-I is going to invert my selection. Command-Shift-I, hit delete. Vice versa, right? Take that shape. Remember our transform tools, Command-T. All of this, if you're confused, folks, is in the first 2 episodes of this series. Watch them back on YouTube or Behance, okay? But look at all this power we have to go ahead and make a little shape, select an area, get rid of it, okay? Lock that layer transparency, come in here and just do this. Grab this darker color, go even darker. Just kind of do that. Oops, like so. Make a little hat, right? Size our brush down using the bracket keys. And then I want to make that brush harder again. I go Control Option and bring that down until I see the hardness value set to 100. Okay, make my brush extra small. Grab that yellow, Option key temporarily calling up the eyedropper. You'll remember with the other tools we use, the other option for you to temporarily call up your eyedropper tool is to hold down the I key. Same thing, temporarily, right? When you let go, you're back to the active tool you're using. I can pop in this way, add a bit of texture there. Okay. This can kind of suggest what that hat is made of, okay? You get the idea, right? I can create a layer underneath this. I can use my brush. And I can paint. Make my brush bigger. Put a little kid here. Like so. Lock that layer transparency with the Shift key. Grab another dark color. Some hair there. Make my brush smaller. Okay. So, lots of control just with that one simple brush to be able to do all of this, right? If I want to erase, what do? Hold down the tilde key. Okay, remember what that looks like? This little guy, right? I can use that same brush to erase and get really specific with these shapes. See that? Very nice. Come up here, use my lasso tool, reshape that hat. You can see how quickly you could start to do some kind of picture book illustration or whatever it is you want. You saw me just zoom right there. Anybody remember how to do that? Right? Command and the keyboard, zoom in. Option keyboard, spacebar, spacebar, command, zoom in. Option, command, zoom out. Okay. Anyway, so a combination of simple round brush and using the lasso tool, setting hard values, soft values, and you're able to make a picture. But the thing about brushes is there are no limits to what you can do, okay? And so let's start to look at what makes them so special here in Photoshop. Up until this moment, we've just been playing with a very simple brush, right? It's just a circle. And we're going to take a look at that now. And we're going to look at the settings that we have available to us to make this brush do something different. And I'll show you that even with just a circle as your stamp, there's a lot you can do. All right, and we'll use that to understand what all these settings mean right here. Pausing for questions here. Let's see, new people joining us. Hey everybody, hey Rick, nice to see ya. Thanks everybody. Hey Bruce, what's up? RB, hey. Lots of nice people joining in. I recognize some names here. Leah, hey, what's up? You're about to create over 100 brushes? Wow. Go for it. Okay. Hi Khaled, nice to see you as well. All right. Looking to see, when you hold Control Option, the preview has a color. How do you change that color? I don't know. RB answered it for you. There you go. Brush preview. You have a color selected. You can change it for brush preview, I guess. Hey Monica, nice to see you. Yeah, I use Photoshop pretty much every other day or every day now. I'm also in Fresco every day. It's just bouncing back and forth all the time. Yeah, the tilde key does not work on a European keyboard. Don't worry about it. You can set a keyboard command for changing your brush mode to clear. That's what you want to do. Okay? Or you can just come over here and you can do it manually. Change it to clear. That'll take whatever brush you have, turn into eraser. If you know you're going to be doing a lot of erasing with a very specific kind of eraser, if it's just a hard round eraser or whatever, you can always hit the E key. E for eraser. You hit the E key, it's going to pull up whatever active eraser you have. Okay, and for me that's this sort of soft edge eraser, which I use for when I'm doing pencil sketches and stuff. I also have a Wacom tablet, and I'm using a Wacom stylus that has an eraser on the back. So what I do is just turn it around and erase sometimes. Depends on what kind of work I'm doing. Okay, but that's another option for you. Back to B for the B key. All right, let's take a look now at these settings. Here we go. We've already looked at spacing. Okay, now let's come over here and look at this little guy. This is the size, the shape of your brush, pardon me. And you have some handles on there. Now if you take these little dots and just start to pinch, look what it does to the shape of your brush. Is it a circle anymore? No, now it's an oval. Okay, so that means I can draw with it like this now. Okay, so different shape. And if I go ahead and leave it as an oval and then reduce the spacing, you'll notice now that when I draw a line, it's going to be wider as I come down and narrower as I go across. It's just reflecting what you would expect. You can imagine right away that this could be handy for people who do calligraphy, for example, right? To have it be wider on the downstroke than on the side strokes, right? Now you'll notice there's also a little arrow here, which means I can change the angle. Aha. Okay, so speaking of calligraphy, now I've got it angled, okay, and a little wider. I can increase that stretch right there. And look at that. So we've just taken the round brush and all we've done is just squeezed it and changed the angle slightly. And this is the result. Okay, so this is all editable right here, right? We also have the size here if in case you want to change it from the slider, but remember it's much faster and easier to use the key commands as with everything else in Photoshop. All right, we're gonna move past this now, right here to Shape Dynamics. And by tapping on Shape Dynamics, you'll notice a little check mark shows up. Now I can turn that on and off. Okay, we're gonna leave it on because we're gonna play with it now. I'm gonna reset everything back to nothing. We're gonna get back to basics here. All right, now, normally this is what it looks like. You have nothing set up yet. And with Shape Dynamics, the first thing I want to talk about is size jitter. And one of the great things about drawing with a stylus, okay, is that you can control the pressure that you are using, right? And so if I were to, for size, decide that I want to control the size, with pressure, I simply tap where it says control on this little drop-down menu and I select pen pressure. And here now this slider becomes active and it tells me that the minimum diameter I have set will be 0%. That really just means 1 pixel, okay? And then as I go up to 100, okay, basically the minimum diameter will be 100% of the size of the brush to begin with, which means there won't be any change when I apply more or less pressure. See? Nothing. This is me drawing with a light touch, this is me drawing with a heavy touch. They all look the same. Now let's do this. Let's make it so that the minimum diameter is as small as it'll possibly be. The maximum, okay, will be 100. Now, I'm going to draw with a light touch. Aha! Look at that. Very different. What about light to heavy? Light to heavy. There you go. So now you can control the diameter of the brush with the pressure that you are using to draw. Okay? Now you might be wondering what jitter is. Jitter is a random value, okay, that you assign here. And the lower the amount of, the lower the number is for jitter, the less variation you're going to see in whatever the thing is that you're changing. In this case, we're talking about diameter. So if I say that I want the size jitter to be 8%, right, I'm going to turn off our pen pressure control for a moment because I want you to see what this looks like. And I'll increase the spacing and you'll get a good idea. So look down here. This is our brush stroke preview. Let's take that size jitter and look, I'm going to increase it to 100. See what happens? What you're telling Photoshop is, as I draw, I want you to change the size of every successive stamp somewhere between the values that I have assigned here with minimum diameter, which means the range of diameters that you can choose from, Photoshop, every time you make a stamp is between 0% or 1% of the total width or diameter of the brush all the way through to 100. And the result is something like this. So each of these stamp sizes that you're seeing fall anywhere between 1% of the total width of the stamp I've selected, which at this point is 60 pixels, or 100, okay? So that could be 10 pixels, 20 pixels, 25 pixels, 5 pixels. It's just gonna completely be random as you go, okay? And that's the result. Now, what happens if you do this, but you take your brush tip and you make it a little bit of a sort of an oval, okay? Come back here, and we reduce our spacing, like so, and we assign pen pressure to control the size of the brush. Look at this. Now you get this kind of a thing. So already you have a really interesting quality to the line just by making those small changes, right? Now you'll notice that the oval itself remains in a fixed orientation. It's always facing the same direction, okay? Well, what if it could follow in the direction that you move the stylus and rotate accordingly? Well, it can. And that's where we come to angle right here. So under control, I just used the word direction. We're going to say direction right here. And now I want you to watch, okay, as I draw, you'll see that the oval is following the direction that I move. And if I increase the spacing, you'll see this reflected in the brush stamp preview as well, okay? So if I do this, move downwards, move to the left, move up, move at an angle, notice how each of these is following the direction that I moved my stylus. So now you get into this situation where you can draw these nice sort of bumpy lines. You can change your size jitter to be a little less. Okay. And now you've got a nice line like this. Getting somewhere towards that kind of mid-century advertising illustration kind of a look. Okay, or the early drawings of Andy Warhol. If you take your hand and shake it a little bit as you make a line, look what you get. You get a nice kind of line like that. Okay. Remember, all of this is just with a simple circle. We're just changing its shape a little bit by squeezing it, telling it to move in a certain direction. And we're already heading towards some interesting options for drawing, right? Draw a little bear here. That's really got a quality to it. Okay. And I haven't done much of anything. You saw how we did this, right? No big deal, right? Very doable to create a custom brush that does that. All right, so let's move on and see what else we can do here. We're controlling things with direction. You can also control things with pen tilt. What this means is if I rotate my wrist, okay, this way, that way, clockwise or counterclockwise, the stamp will change accordingly. If I make it bigger, you'll see this much more clearly. Watch here. I'm rotating now counterclockwise, and now I'm rotating clockwise. And what does that do? Well, this means I can orient the brush this way. Okay, and if I turn off all my size jitter stuff and increase spacing, you'll see this very clearly. Okay, here we go. I'm going to move up. I'm going to take my hand and rotate it counterclockwise and now move up. See the difference? Okay, and up again. So I'm controlling the angle there. This is particularly good for people who need to draw or paint with a brush, and they can change the angle to make different kinds of strokes in the art and not have it be as repetitive. Okay, so that's what pen tilt is. Now there are other options here, okay, and you can figure out what those are in your own time. We're not going to cover all of them because we want to stick with the ones that are most used. The only one I want to talk about briefly is fade, and I'm going to talk about that one over here with size so you understand how it works. Fade allows you to set a value for the number of pixels, okay? I'm going to do 200. The distance it's going to take for you to go from the full value, okay, in this case 125 pixels, down to nothing. Ready? See that? It automatically is going to fade over the span of that distance. Okay? So why is that useful? Well, here's why. Imagine if you have to do repetitive strokes for something, okay? And I'll make my brush a little smaller. And let's say I'm doing like a manga, sort of a comic, and I need to do some action lines. I can do this, okay? And I know that every single one of those lines is going to fade automatically for me from 100% of the diameter down to 0. So this is a really, really handy little cheat for doing that. So good to be aware of it. It's not used by enough people that need to know about it, so there it is, okay? All right, we'll turn that off. All right, let's take a look at roundness jitter. This one's great if you're looking for a way to have the stamp be distorted, okay? You're going to be able to affect what you see here, which is that squishiness, okay, of your brush stamp. But you're going to be able to do that in a random way or with a control right here, roundness. If I say that I want to control this with pen pressure, I can set a minimum roundness. In this case, it says 30%. What that means is what the value would be here if I were to squish this down to 30. See where it says roundness right there? Okay. If that were going to be about 30%, I now have the ability with pressure here to have the let me just change the angle here so you can see this. And we'll make sure that this is set to direction. There we go. Instead of using my pen to control the diameter, okay, my pen is instead going to now control, the pressure rather is going to control, okay, the height of that brush. It's either going to be squished at 30% of its total height into an oval, or be at 100 based on pressure, which means light pressure is going to make it more of an oval, okay? And heavy pressure, as I do that, see, is going to make it into that circle. Now the effect you get is similar to what you get with diameter, but if you look at the spacing, you'll see what's really happening here, okay? See that? Full pressure gets me a circle, light pressure gets me that squishy oval. This is particularly good if you want to have non-repetitive brush strokes with a paintbrush kind of a brush, but also for special effects, like if you wanted to have some kind of a blocky shape and you want it sometimes to be squished, sometimes raised, if you're doing leaves or other things where you want the foliage to change shape, more flat, more full, lots of neat stuff you can do with this. Okay, so that is pen pressure, roundness, and pen pressure is controlling it in this instance, okay? Notice too that you have a jitter option, and just like any other jitter, well, by changing that, it's going to change, right, randomly what happens as I draw. Sometimes it's a really squishy oval, and sometimes it's a perfect circle and everything in between, okay? We forgot to mention for angle there's a jitter as well. Now of course you can figure out what that is without me even showing you, but I'll just start to do it, and look, what do you see happening with the brush stroke preview? Of course, it's taking that shape and it's rotating it randomly as you draw. Alrighty. Now, we are still just dealing with a circle, okay? So let's do a little bit of roundness jitter. And let's go ahead and do a little bit of size jitter, okay? And we've got angle jitter set at 100, okay? And now, let's go on to the next category because I'm going to show you something fun, and that's scattering. Now you've seen before brushes that do some kind of spatter, right? The way I do this is scatter, which means I'm going to scatter these brush stamps. See this? Along the line that I'm drawing, we're going to be moving above or below that stroke that I'm drawing. There's currently a count of 4. What does that mean? It means I'm actually applying 4 separate instances of that stamp shape simultaneously every time it's stamped down along the line. Okay? If I reduce that just to 1, you'll have a good idea of what this looks like. See this? Let's increase that scattering right there. And here you'll see an option for both axes. What does that mean? Well, that means X and Y. So I can make the stamp that I'm applying jump, okay, a certain percentage to the left, to the right, up, or above exactly where my stylus is at that moment. So it's scattering it, pushing it around. And here's the result, okay? Now, if we do increase the count to say, let's say 5 instances, and really increase the scattering, pardon me, and then tell it we want to move along both axes, so it's pushing it in all directions. Go back to our shape dynamics, put that size jitter at 100%, okay? And come back here, and we can increase that spacing or decrease that spacing however we want, and get a kind of a spattering kind of effect, like this. Now you get the picture, right? See that? Can we increase that? Go to scattering and decrease the number of instances, maybe to 3. Here's the result. If you go ahead and turn pen pressure on to control all that for size, now you got small, big. Okay, you can start to control all that. You can see how fun this is to start playing around with and understanding. Okay, Again, we're still doing all of this with a simple circle. We haven't even gotten into a custom shape, have we? All right, now looking back at scatter, you can even control, okay, how much scattering there is with pen pressure, okay, right here. If I turn that off, okay, it's just gonna randomly spatter all over the place, okay. If I turn pen pressure on, that means that with light pressure, look, not much scatter at all. It's not really scattering, it's following that line, okay? But as I increase pressure, it's gonna push things away from the line, up, down, left, right. So that's really, really cool because you can have a lot of control over that effect, okay? Very nice. Now, the count jitter is exactly what you'd expect. If you have a count of 5 instances of the same stamp over and over again, the jitter is just going to make it so that sometimes it'll be 1, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 5. Totally depends. If I put that up to 100, it's just going to randomly assign it. Okay. Hope you're starting to get the idea here with jitter. See how that works. Okay, we'll turn off scatter here for a moment. Pull this back down. All right, get ourselves back to sort of a normal spot here. Okay. All right, now the next thing I want to show you is back to shape dynamics, flip X and Y jitter. All right, what does that mean? Well, for this, I want to change the shape of the brush. Okay, so let's go back. And I'm going to select one of the custom brushes I have here. And let's see, I'll use one of these brushes here. This is a good one. Actually, you know what? I'll make a brush for you because I think that'll be an easier way to explain what's going on, and you'll understand what's happening. All right, check this out. I'm using my lasso tool, okay? And on a blank canvas, I'm just going to do this. Sorry about that. Here we go. Going to make this shape right here. All right, I'm going to fill that with black. Option delete, fill with foreground color. And we're going to make this into a brush, okay? Now to do that is so easy. All you need to do is have a white background, and then any color will do for your stamp, okay? But this will be the stamp that I want. And if I just come over here to edit, define brush preset, Photoshop looks at everything on the canvas, all layers combined, and takes whatever pixel data is there and says, I'm going to make a brush for you right here. So you call this whatever you want. We'll call this ABC, okay? And it tells you the size, and when you say okay, look at that. My stylus now, when I hover it over the screen, shows me this brush. Isn't that nuts? All right, so what can we do with this? Well, let's go ahead and open up our settings, okay? Here's that brush. You can do anything you could do before. You can change the spacing. Okay, so now I can do this. Nice. You can go into shape dynamics. You can do size jitter. So now I can do this. Okay. And what else can we do? Well, you know the rest. Angle jitter, right? Roundness jitter, getting really crazy, scattering. You can size it down and do this. Look how quick that is. Now, I was going to show you what we're going to deal with the X and the Y jitter, okay? You probably already figured out what this is, okay? But you notice that this brush has a very specific orientation, right? It's a specific shape where it's a straight edge on the right and a curvilinear edge on the left of the stamp right here, okay? There it is. Now, if I go to my shape dynamics and I say flip X jitter, look what it does. See that? It's flipping it, okay, horizontally, randomly. So now if I paint with it, it'll occasionally bounce over to the right, occasionally back to the left. If I do flip Y, of course, it's going to do the same. Here we go. Flip Y, it's going to flip it vertically, okay? And you have the option to do both. So you can turn them both on. And this is going to be the result. Very, very handy for things where you don't want, again, a lot of repetition. If you want to do pattern stuff, if you want to do some neat leafy stuff, whatever you need, okay? That's how you do it. Now, while we've got this brush selected, let's take a look at what we can do with transfer. Transfer allows you to use pressure, all right, to make the brush less opaque or more opaque as you're painting. And for full opacity, okay, you would have it set to where you have nothing on transfer, it's completely off, and I'm just painting with full opacity. And I'll go ahead and reduce my spacing here to 0. All right, and this is the result, okay? But now let's try this. Let's go here and let's go to our brush settings and turn on transfer and say, look, here's what I want to do. Where it says opacity and control, I want pen pressure to control the opacity, and let's set it all the way down to 0. Now, did you see what happened down here to my brush stroke preview? Back up to 100, back down to 0. Let's start with a bit of light pressure and move our way towards full. Look at that. Very nice, very nice. We'll cross over it this way. See, now you're really getting somewhere. Now you're able to do all kinds of fancy things. Now, about 20 minutes ago, I was working with that basic hard round brush. I had no transfer settings applied to it. But you can now imagine how much control I would have had when trying to paint that shadow shape with a soft brush with the opacity setting to where I could control it with pen pressure, thanks to transfer. Right, so just to look at that, I could go to our brush settings here, go to brush tip shape, and just use a basic circle again. You can see the result right here, okay? Look at that. Lots and lots of control. And remember, I can change the hardness of that brush too. Option control, and bring that hardness all the way to 0. Now I've got a soft brush with transfer settings, so I can go like this, and I can go like this, and like this. Look at all that control. It's like kind of an airbrush effect, okay? So lots of nifty stuff I can do there. Cross over it, etc. Shape dynamics, go ahead and turn them on. Now, if I use light pressure, I get a small and faint line. Heavy pressure, wider, less faint, and also more opaque, okay? And everything in between. Very, very, very nice, okay? Now with transfer, you also have the option, okay, to have a jitter. So if I turn the transfer jitter on, look at this. What does this mean? This means that as I'm drawing, okay, let's go ahead and increase spacing. The opacity is going to randomly shift, okay, between 0 and 100. And if I turn off pen pressure and then draw, you can see the result. Some of these are less opaque than others, okay? And if I go ahead and take my brush hardness back down to 100 and do the same thing, you'll see very clearly what's happening here. Okay? Some fully opaque, some transparent, okay? Very nice to be able to do that as well. All right, now there are some other things to look at here. There's color dynamics and dual brush, but we're gonna save those for the next time. They're much more advanced and there's a lot of stuff to explain there. But what I want you to take away from today is this. To review, a Photoshop brush is merely a shape that you are repeatedly stamping onto your canvas, okay, whenever you make a stroke. Now, you can control the spacing between each of those stamps, right? Right here under brush tip shape, here's your spacing. You can control how that shape is going to change based on your input with your pen using pen pressure, all right? You can also control the angle using pen tilt or direction. Can even do it with pen pressure, which will create a very random kind of a look. We can look at that next time. But we know about pressure, tilt, and we know about direction, okay? You can also have a lot of control over the roundness of that stamp. And remember to always look down here if you want to see what's going to happen to the brush. The Photoshop brush preview window is so handy in giving you a little preview of what's going to happen when you paint, okay? But I can see the result right there, right? You can flip your X and your Y jitter. You can control scattering, right? Simply by adding a value. The higher that value, the more scatter you're going to get. You can have the option to scatter it along the X and Y axis right here, X and Y. You can control the number of times, okay, a stamp is going to appear in a single moment, all right, by simply increasing this count right here. So we have a lot more there, you can see that, right? It's like one of those fun ball pits you go to at a little McDonald's or something. All right, and then you also have transfer. And transfer is going to allow you to control the opacity of the stamp. And you have jitter with that, okay? And you can control all of this right here. And you can also assign a control of pen pressure to affect how opaque that mark is, all right? So, here we go. Fully opaque down to more transparent. Reduce your spacing if you want to have a solid line, like so. Turn off transfer. Now we're back to drawing with full opacity all the way through. And that's pretty much it. Now we didn't cover anything crazy. The second thing we covered, which is a good takeaway from this, is that anything can be a brush. Simply put some marks on the canvas, go to Edit, define brush preset, give it a name if you want or don't, say OK, and the moment you do that, you are off to the races. You've got a brush. Go ahead and play with the size dynamics, okay? And the scattering and whatever else, and here you've got a nice little spatter tool right here. Just like that, see? You like a brush you made and you want to save it? Very simple, look. Here's the brush, I say, I kind of like this. There's a little plus sign right there. Just tap on that plus sign and say, here's what I want to save this brush as. Okay, you can include all the tool settings. Okay, that's just saying whether or not it's going to have a specific flow and opacity set to it. All right, capture the brush size, sure. Give it a name. And then say OK. And there it appears in my list. And I can go to any other brush, play with it for a while, and then if I say, oh, I want to come back to that one, well, there it is waiting for me. If I want to save a brush or any number of brushes, select that brush or select any number of brushes. Come right here, the little drop-down menu, and say Export Selected Brushes. And you can save an ABR file with those brushes in it. Now, here's the question. How many of you out there are going to make hundreds of brushes all on your own? Probably almost no one. And that's why I'm excited to tell you that there are over 2,000 brushes at your disposal that do everything you could ever want. Inks and pencils and paints and everything in between, right here. Same drop-down menu, Get More Brushes. When you tap on Get More Brushes, it's going to pull up a window where you can sign in with your Adobe ID and password, and you're going to get access to those brushes right here. Kyle's brushes, that's me. And I make new brushes for you every quarter, as well as a couple times a year for special occasions and events and promos. So you get about 100 or more brushes every year as part of your subscription to Creative Cloud. Okay, there you have it. There you have it, folks. That's pretty great. All right, so that's a nice intro to brushes for you all. Play around with them, have some fun. If you have any questions, hit me up on Twitter at Kyle T. Webster. And the next time we get together, we're going to look at some more advanced brush stuff, as well as mixer brushes, which are pretty cool. They allow you to mix color right on the canvas, as well as do some other pretty fancy things. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in 2 weeks, and I'll see you on Friday for my masterclass. Okay? In the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Remember to be kind, and I'll say ciao for now.